The total number of constructions here in Philae Temple in Aswan is 15 temples. The main one is Isis Temple, where I'm standing now. The first Ptolemaic king who built here was Ptolemy IV, followed by the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and was the 11th. All the main constructions that you should find in any Egyptian temple built during the New Kingdom, you'll find them here in Philae Temple. Passing through the main gate of Isis Temple, we find ourselves standing in the second open court, which lies ahead of the second pylon. On the left side is the birth chapel of god Horus, and on the right is a row of columns, which capitals are decorated with flowers and plants. They are called floral capitals. On the back of the pylon are high reliefs of King Neos Dionysos in front of Osiris, Isis, and other deities. Below the scene are sacred barks carried by a parade of priests. On the other half of the pylon, the king stands in front of god Ammon and goddess Mut and other gods. The Mamizi is the birth chapel that is to be found in any temple in Egypt where there is a mother goddess and her child. Naturally, it's found here in Isis Temple. The famous goddess of motherhood in her own mythology of her triad, which is composed of herself, her husband Osiris, and her baby Horus. In front of the main building is an aisle, which ceiling is based on 4 columns, followed by 2 chambers, then a sanctuary. On 3 sides of the Mamizi stretches a row of beautiful granite columns with floral composite capitals, topped by apexes of musical instruments carrying Hathoric heads. All the walls and the screen walls between the columns are decorated with scenes of Ptolemy VI, or the 7th or the 11th, and Emperor Tiberius, in the presence of several gods. The reliefs inside the inner chambers tell the story of the birth of Horus here, being a convenient place for his birth, witnessed by a group of gods in the marshes of Papyrus. After his birth, he stands there, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. The rest of the scenes explain the story of the birth of Horus and his unusual childhood, which was full of strife and heroism. This huge granite stone is a thanks letter from the priests of Aswan of Isis Temple, thanking him for exempting them from paying taxes according to the low flood of the Nile, and being so proud of their language, they wrote it only in hieroglyphic handwriting compared to the Rosetta Stone in the British Museum. This is a copy of it, written and dedicated to King Ptolemy V. In the second open court of Isis Temple lies the Mamizi, where Horus was born. The scenes of the celebration of his birth were relieved on the outer wall of the Mamizi. There stand 7 ladies of the choir beating on the drum. They were celebrating the newborn child for 7 days continuously, the act which continued in Egypt and became its only important tradition concerning a newborn, except for reducing the number of days to become 1 on the 7th day of the birth. This was the final and the biggest day of all in the past. The open court ends by the second pylon with its 2 towers, which breadth is 37.8 meters and height is 14.5 meters. A back slope leads to the top of the facade. The reliefs show Neos Dionysos burning incense and offering gifts to god Horus and Hathor and other gods. Out of the northern towers, a massive block of granite pops up as a natural formation island. So the ancient Egyptians sculptured and polished it, forming a base to the pylon over which Ptolemy VI Philometor and his wife stand in front of Isis and Horus, then Osiris and Isis. An important inscription was relieved on it, telling similar information to the one inscribed on the Rosetta Stone. It's a dedication of this territory to Isis, and the thanks letter to King Ptolemy V's Abivans, thanking for relieving the priests from paying taxes, as the flood of the Nile was low that year. The text here is written in hieroglyphics, which is a formal handwriting of the ancient Egyptian language. This is the world's largest official document ever inscribed, and deserves the highest degree of appreciation, since it was not only big in size, but also relieved in one of the hardest stones on earth, granite. It was with a strong determination to last forever, and indeed it will, according to the strong will of the ancient Egyptians, which always wins.
Philae temples were situated on an island 4 kilometers south to Aswan. They were called Pa-Ilek, which means the borders, as they were situated on the borders between the Nile Valley and the Nubian lands, or the north and the south. This word Pa-Ilek was changed in the Coptic era into P-Lake, and in the Greek period into Philae. Now they were transported into another island nearby.
Behind the second open court in Philae Temple lies a small hall resting on 4 columns and screen walls joining between them, followed by another 4 columns to help hold the whole ceiling. The hall was totally relieved, but the reliefs of the eastern side were deliberately removed. Bishop Theodoros proudly took the credit of that damage and wrote this shameful deed on the side of the gate that leads to the next hall. He wrote that he achieved that good work to construct a Christian church. Words, he mutilated the ancient Egyptian temple to claim that it became a church. He placed an altar and removed a block of stone in front of it and carved the Christian symbol of the seashell, where a picture of Mary must have been placed. Then he carved Coptic crosses all around the altar and at the sides of the gates too. It would have been better if the bishop left the temple alone in the 6th century, and the same wall noted the inscription which celebrates the memory of the Pope Gregory XVI's campaign, which he had sent in 1841. The design of Isis temple is similar to any ancient Egyptian temple, which ends by a sanctuary. 3 small vestibules lead to the sanctuary. The last one's part has reliefs of God Habi, the Nile god, standing carrying the symbols of the cities of Egypt and introducing offerings to the triad gods of the temple. Each Habi represents one of the 42 nomes of Egypt. The original light system in the temple is activated through a natural distribution of light, reducing it to the least minimum, which is darkness, by the time it reaches the sanctuary. It gets lower and the ground gets higher gradually, while less openings are made in the ceilings and thick wooden doors separate between parts of the temple. In the open court, light is all over, and in the first hall there are half-screen walls, but in the sanctuary there isn't a single window, and there is only complete darkness. The sanctuary is the most important chamber in any temple in Egypt, for it's considered the private room of the god in his house. Only the king and the high priest are allowed to enter this sacred chamber that lies at the end of the central axis of the temple. All the rituals performed here revolves around the main god or goddess who resides in his naos, in the sanctuary. It was called in ancient Egyptian Set Weret, or the Grand Throne, the name of the king's throne, each crowned in his place, where worshipping rituals and offerings are presented. In the middle of the sanctuary, a base or altar was placed for the rest of the naos, or the sacred bark, where the golden statue of the god is placed. It was considered a secret bigger than all the secrets of the world and the netherworld, and more hidden than the dwellers of the eternal world. So it has been built and placed in its private dark room. This statue was the center of the daily services of the temple. The scenes on the walls of Isis Temple's Holy of the Holies are connected with the resurrection story of Osiris and the sacrifice of his son Horus with his eye, fighting in his honor. Here, he is seen held by his wife goddess Isis, who spreads her wings to protect him. Meanwhile, he presents Horus with an eye, substituting his lost eye. Isis is represented suckling her son twice. Once she's sitting down with baby Horus over her laps, and another time standing up with him in his baby form, with a hair lock on the side of his head. In scenes, Isis cries hard beside Osiris' coffin, while Anubis, the mummification god, stands above it. The side rooms have reliefs of Osiris' cult and his resurrection, and an enormous number of offerings presented to him. So in the sanctuary and its attached rooms lies the core of the mythology of Isis, Osiris, and Horus, where she recorded the story of one of the most important religions in ancient Egypt. Whenever the name Philae is mentioned, one building stands out in everyone's memory, representing the image of beauty which this island represents. This building is Trajan Kiosk. It's a building with which the Roman emperor contributed to the constructions of Philae. It's composed of a square room surrounded by 14 columns. These columns hold apexes with bases that were prepared for carving Hathoric heads in them. The capitals are the finest example of composite floral capitals, each bearing a collection of flowers, palm reeds, and plants. Screen walls join between the columns and be relieved with scenes of the emperor, imitating the rituals of the Egyptian pharaohs. Only 2 scenes were carved. One shows Trajan. Only 2 scenes were carved. One shows Trajan burning incense in front of Osiris and Isis, and the other shows him presenting wine to Isis and Hathor. The kiosk has 2 entrances on its east and west sides. Through the Nile gate, one can stand in the terrace which overlooks the old site of the temple, which is Philae Island, where bars of steel stand in the water marking it, and the tremendous work done in moving the collection of the 15 temples to today's island of Angelica, 600 meters away. In spite of the fact that Trajan Kiosk was never finished, yet it had successfully acquired a special place in the imaginations and the hearts of the visitors and the lovers of Philae monument. Throughout thousands of years, travelers of Egypt left their names and date of visiting carved on the walls of the monuments all over the country, turning it into a phenomenon called graffiti. Philae Temple got its share of wide variety of graffitis that not only differ from each other, but also record important historical events which the island had witnessed. Egypt was occupied by England for almost 70 years, starting in 1882. 2 years later, an English campaign was sent to Sudan, where many soldiers lost their lives. In the memory of 9 officers and 92 NCOs and men killed in action and died of disease in Sudan between 1884 and 1885, a text bearing their names was carved on the outer side wall of the second hall of the temple. It's a unique graffiti, unmatched even with Bishop Theodorus in the church within in 577 AD. As for Pope Gregory XVI, he had sent an archaeological campaign in 1841 to Philae and recorded that in another graffiti. Philae couldn't even be safe from soldiers who came in Napoleon Bonaparte's campaign, as one of their troops, led by General Doucet, recorded their existing here. In addition, there are many Greek and Coptic graffitis inscribed on the walls, knowing that Philae Temple is the last temple in Egypt that closed its doors, ending the practice of 4,000 years of ancient Egyptian religion. Even that event was recorded in an almost graffiti way on the inner walls of Hadrian Gate, where we see the last hieroglyphic words inscribed on the walls of an Egyptian monument in the 7th century.